Welcome to our journey into the fascinating world of amphibians. Imagine trying to live in two completely different worlds at the same time, like having a house on land, but needing to swim in a pool every few hours just to survive. This is exactly the life of an amphibian. Today, we are going to explore their general characters, understand how they serve as the evolutionary bridge between fish and reptiles, and even use a bit of mathematics to uncover the secrets of how they breathe. Let us dive right in. Now that we know what we are studying, let us look at what the word actually means. The term amphibia translates from Greek as both kinds of life. This perfectly describes their unique and demanding lifestyle. Why does this matter? Because amphibians serve as the ultimate evolutionary bridge. They show us the incredible transition from fish, which strictly live in water, to reptiles, which strictly live on land. By studying them, we get a front row seat to one of the greatest transitions in the history of life on Earth, watching how aquatic creatures slowly adapted to breathe air and walk on soil. Building on their evolutionary history, let us examine their defining physical traits. Formally, amphibians are ectothermic, or cold-blooded, tetrapod vertebrates. A key feature of their dual life is metamorphosis, where they transform from a water-breathing juvenile into an air-breathing adult. Their most defining physical characteristic is their smooth, moist, and scaleless skin, which is packed with mucus glands to prevent them from drying out. Furthermore, unlike birds or reptiles, they lay anamniotic eggs. This means their eggs lack a protective, waterproof shell, so they absolutely must be laid in water or very damp environments to survive. Beyond their external features, their internal anatomy is equally fascinating. Amphibians possess a unique three-chambered heart, consisting of two atria and one single ventricle. Because there is only one ventricle, oxygenated blood from the lungs mixes with deoxygenated blood from the body before being pumped out. To compensate for this mixed blood, they rely heavily on multiple modes of respiration. As larvae, they use gills. As adults, they use a combination of lungs, the lining of their mouth, and incredibly, their own skin. This adaptability is crucial for surviving in both aquatic and terrestrial habitats. Understanding these physical traits helps us see why amphibians are so important to our world today. Because their skin is highly permeable and they interact constantly with both water and land, they are considered excellent bioindicators of ecosystem health. If a local water source becomes polluted, amphibians are usually the very first animals to get sick or disappear. They act like an ecological alarm system for humans. Furthermore, studying their unique skin peptides has led to major breakthroughs in human medicine, including new painkillers and antibiotics. Without them, insect populations would explode, disrupting the entire global food web. This brings us to one of the most magical things about amphibians: their ability to breathe directly through their skin. This biological process is known as cutaneous respiration. For this to work efficiently, the skin must be extremely thin and constantly kept moist. This is exactly why you rarely see a frog sitting out in the hot, dry sun. But how do we actually measure how well a frog can breathe through its skin? To answer this, biologists and biophysicists use a fundamental mathematical principle. This math will show us exactly why amphibians are restricted to moist environments and why they cannot grow to the massive size of elephants. To measure this skin breathing, we use Fick's law of diffusion. This formula comes from biophysics and calculates the exact rate at which oxygen enters the amphibian's bloodstream. The formula states that R equals D times A times delta P, all divided by D. Let us break down the symbols. R is the total rate of gas diffusion, telling us how much oxygen enters per second. D is the diffusion coefficient, a constant depending on the gas and skin moisture. A is the total surface area of the skin. Delta P is the difference in oxygen pressure between the outside air and the frog's blood, acting as the driving force. Finally, D in the denominator is the physical thickness of the skin. Notice that if the surface area A increases, the frog absorbs more oxygen. But if the skin thickness D increases, the rate of oxygen absorption drops dramatically. Now that we have our formula, let us see this with a concrete example. Imagine a small tree frog sitting on a damp leaf. We want to calculate the rate at which oxygen diffuses through its skin. We are given the diffusion coefficient D as 2 times 10 to the negative fifth. The frog has a total skin surface area A of 50 square centimeters. The pressure difference, delta P, is 0.2 atmospheres. Finally, the frog's skin is incredibly thin, with a thickness D of just 0.01 centimeters. Our strategy is to simply plug these values into Fick's law and solve for R. By setting up the equation this way, we can isolate the exact impact of the skin's physical dimensions on the frog's ability to breathe. Let us solve the equation we just set up. First, we multiply the values in the numerator. 2 times 10 to the negative fifth times 50 times 0.2 gives us 2 times 10 to the negative fourth. This number represents the total driving force and capacity for oxygen to enter the skin before accounting for the physical barrier. Next, we divide this driving force by the skin thickness of 0.01. This gives us a final diffusion rate of 0.02 cubic centimeters of oxygen per second. Physically, this means that every single second, the frog passively absorbs 0.02 units of oxygen directly through its skin without ever needing to use its lungs. So even without opening its mouth or using its lungs, the frog is still breathing through its moist outer skin. So we have successfully calculated the breathing rate for a normal frog. This brings us to an important biological question. Why can amphibians not have thick, scaly skin, like reptiles, to protect themselves from the sun? Let us prove this mathematically. Suppose our tree frog suddenly evolved skin that is 0.5 centimeters thick. That is 50 times thicker than before. All other variables, the frog's size and the outside air, remain exactly the same. Because the top variables are unchanged, our numerator remains 2 times 10 to the negative fourth. We will now divide this same driving force by the new, much larger thickness to see how a heavy physical barrier impacts respiration. Let us complete this mathematical proof. We take our numerator of 2 times 10 to the negative fourth and divide it by the new skin thickness of 0.5. Notice how the denominator is now much larger. Mathematically, dividing by a larger number means the overall result must become much smaller. This perfectly illustrates the inverse relationship between barrier thickness and diffusion rate. The new diffusion rate is a mere 0.0004 cubic centimeters of oxygen per second. By making the skin thick and scaly, the frog's ability to breathe has dropped by a massive factor of 50. This mathematical reality proves a core biological character. Amphibians are absolutely forced to have thin, scaleless skin. Otherwise, they would suffocate. Now that we have proven the math, let us visualize this process. On screen is a model of cutaneous respiration. At the top, the blue area represents the outside air, labeled high P for high oxygen pressure. At the bottom, the pink area represents the inside of the frog, labeled low P, where you can see the red blood capillaries waiting for oxygen. The thin layer separating them is the frog's skin, and its thickness is marked by the letter D. The large arrows show oxygen naturally flowing from the high pressure outside, straight through that thin skin barrier and into the low pressure bloodstream. As our formula in the corner reminds us, if we were to stretch that barrier D and make it thicker, those arrows would shrink, choking off the oxygen supply. We have covered a lot of ground today, so let us summarize the key takeaways. First, amphibians are unique transitional vertebrates defined by their dual life, bridging the evolutionary gap between water and land. Second, their most critical general characters, such as thin, moist skin and anamniotic eggs, tie them permanently to moist environments. Third, as we proved mathematically using Fick's law of diffusion, their reliance on cutaneous respiration strictly dictates their physical anatomy, preventing them from developing thick protective scales. Finally, understanding these traits highlights exactly why they are so incredibly vulnerable to environmental changes, making them vital bioindicators for our planet. You now have a solid understanding of the general characters of amphibia.